So the first thing I always like to start with whenever we talk about BIM is virtual building and how BIM will increase the efficiency and the workflow of your process for architecture. So really what BIM is about, and from a basic standpoint, is shifting the process from 2D drafting to intelligent 3D modeling. And I always like to start with this particular process because this allows us to actually talk about this in relationship to not just 3D modeling like SketchUp or FormZ, but actually in terms of how it works with an integrated 3D database. And that's really what makes the difference between a BIM program and a modeling program, is that integrated 3D database. Because what that does is it allows us to connect our plans, our sections, our elevations, details, schedules, and many other facets of the building to the model, so that when you make a change in one view, it updates any connected and interrelated views. The holy grail, of course, all of this is the fact that it does reduce the risk through improved coordination. And so that when you change something in one view in plan, it updates your elevations, it updates your sections, updates any other views that are connected to that particular change, and therefore eliminates the risk of errors, or at least decreases it quite dramatically, by allowing the model to update automatically. So let's first talk about BIM and design, how that relates to this part of it, of the process. So the first thing I always like to start with, in terms of, for those of you maybe looking at ArchiCAD for the first time, is that ArchiCAD tools are simple to use and easy to learn. They're built around the idea of an architecture and design process. What you'll notice is the first thing when you open up ArchiCAD is the tools are very much organized in a way that, as an architect or as a designer or as a builder, it's easy to understand. They're wall tools, door tools, window tools, skylight, very simple tools that allow us to get into the program very fast and very easily. It also allows us to use the program for doing quick early sketch design. There's a sketch engine built into ArchiCAD that can create the renderings you see here through a very easy process of simply rendering with a sketch renderer and selecting different options for Koh-i-Noor, ink, pen, pencil, and different options that you have within the system. The program also allows us to track areas and space program data. So as you begin to develop your model, develop design, you're probably going to want to track the rooms and the square footages and the relationship of spaces, so that you can begin to develop interactive bi-directional schedules. What that means is that as I change the plan in terms of information within the rooms, it will update the schedule. If I reach into the schedule and change a designation of a category for a zone, or for a room name or a room number, that will go back and update the model. Another area I like to talk about with ArchiCAD is a relationship of what I call a hybrid BIM process. That is a connection between 2D and 3D. And this is specifically appropriate when we talk about details. Within ArchiCAD, what we can do is we can actually go in and create a wall system, much like we would have drafted in the old process of using 2D drafting by hand or by computer. We can draft that information, we can give details to it, but what ArchiCAD allows us to do is to take that a step further, because we can actually give every line, every edge here, a color and a material that's attached to it. So that when that particular element gets drawn within the plan and it's extruded, it contains more than just line work. It contains information about the materiality of that surface. So this allows us to quickly create very detailed wall components slab components, and roof components. And as we draw them, as we extrude them, we can actually take our section tool or our detail tool and cut sections and details, pull those into other drawings to begin to further develop the drawings that we're going to need for our construction documents. ArchiCAD also has an intelligent building system. That building system, these building system tools allow us to create curtain walls, storefront systems, wall panel systems, and raised floor systems. The tools are designed around creating specific components that describe what that system's about. So in this case, a curtain wall system, for example, the first thing we describe is the system by which the curtain wall will be defined. So the top is the glazing, and the bottom is an opaque panel. And as you see, that simple panel, once it's extruded and drawn in 2D, creates a system by which it follows that very nature of what and how it was created. Now, even though this is a system that's very regular, we can actually reach into any one of these panels and change the color and change the type, as I'll talk about in more detail in a second. But we can also define very specific patterns that get repeated within a system to whatever our design intent may be. But these systems are not just composed of simple forms. They can be composed of very detailed and very specific types of frame components and edge components and various parts of the system that make up our curtain wall systems, for frames, for panels, junctions, and accessories. So when we create a project such as this one in South of Market here in San Francisco, we can create a system that is repetitive but actually has some unique characteristics about it. By simply changing the color of some of the panels, we create a system that looks irregular, but at the same time has a regular method in the way that it's constructed. And as you can see with these panels here, as I mentioned before, we can reach into any one of them and change the color and the type. We can even combine panels so that if we had a door, for instance, or a window that was going to be larger than one panel, we could combine 4 panels in this case to create the door. We can even stretch and change and customize the shapes of our panels, both on the exterior of that curtain wall system as well as internally. Now, Graphisoft also gives us access to a database of a wide database of online objects. Within ArchiCAD, we have direct access to something called BIMcomponents.com. This is a user-driven database of objects. It allows us to actually search for objects internally through ArchiCAD and then bring those objects directly into the program. We can also use a third-party object database for accessing thousands of manufacturing objects called BIMobject.com. And of course, we also have a very good relationship with the Trimble 3D Warehouse, which is powered by Google, which is made up of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of SketchUp objects, as well as SketchUp buildings that can be directly imported in and brought into our ArchiCAD environment. Now, as we're developing this design, one of the things we all obviously want to do is be able to present it. ArchiCAD has built into it the abilities I mentioned to do sketch renderings earlier, but also to create much more refined renderings as part of this process. We can develop line renderings. We can develop very nice shaded and color renderings, both in 2D and 3D. We can develop very nice presentations for showcasing our architectural design. And we can also quickly visualize using the photo rendering engine when we want to create renderings that really showcase ArchiCAD or showcase the design from a high-level rendering perspective. And within the rendering system, we can actually look at lights, materials, reflections, or refractions as part of this process. We also can tap into something called ArtLantis. ArtLantis has a direct connection to ArchiCAD. It now allows us to actually create a virtual reality walkthrough of our ArchiCAD model using iVisit 3D. By simply placing nodes within our ArchiCAD model, we can create a rendering that can be saved out and shown using the iVisit 3D platform on our computers through the browser, or through a mobile device, such as the iPad, where we can actually save this out and allow a user, a client, or for our own benefit of giving a presentation where the iPad could be connected to an overhead projector, or simply sitting down in front of the client, taking them through the space. But what this particular application allows us to do is to create a beautiful, interactive walkthrough rendered with shades and shadows through a radiosity type environment where we're creating very high-end renderings as part of this process. And each of the nodes within the rendered environment allow us to click from point to point and walk through the project and the design to which you created. I also invite you to join us on this Thursday, December 12th, as we continue to talk about BIM for interior design, where we will focus a little bit more on ArtLantis 5 and how that can be used not only for interiors, but for many applications, as we review that in a little bit more detail. If you have not registered for that, so we go to archivista.com, and on the homepage you'll see BIM for interior design, and you can register at that location. Now, as we begin to develop a design with an ArchiCAD, one of the things that's really important is how we use the design to do energy analysis and to develop it for a sustainable design process. ArchiCAD 17 was recently released this summer, and within ArchiCAD 17, one of the new facets of this program is the ability for us to be able to have building components defined as part of our systems that are actually intelligent, so that as this particular system connects with the roof, it knows automatically to join that, and it knows the relationships of different building materials to each other through what's called priority connections. Those building materials, in a very simple way here, are defined by name. So we can enter a new building material gypsum, give it a priority so that it has priority over a different type of materials. So when one joins with another, you can define how that connects to each other. We can, of course, define the structural appearance, including how it's going to look in 2D, meaning floor plan, section, elevation, as well as how it's going to look in 3D. And again, how the intersection priority is going to be defined. And then in addition to that, from an energy analysis perspective, it allows us to assign thermal conductivity, density, and heat capacity as part of the process. So that as we're beginning to define the materials within our project and within our design, we can also define information that can be used for doing energy analysis within the program. As we define this information, we can also add operation profiles so that as we do our energy analysis, it understands how the spaces are going to be used during the day and what type of energy use they're going to require. This information is assigned to the model so that when we go to Eco Designer, which is included with ArchiCAD 17, We can actually go in and create not only our operation profiles, but we can assign environment settings, climate data, building systems, energy source factors, energy costs, and energy simulation options. All that so that we can actually use this in an early design phase for helping us have informed decisions about the energy use of our buildings. The key to, and the way that Eco-Designer is meant to be used, is to create energy analysis reports to inform us in that early design phase. It's not meant as a program for use by engineers in the latter phases of a project where you would need more sophisticated and more detailed energy analysis. It's really, this is meant to be used in the early design process to help you as the architect inform your design decisions, and also, more important, to help you as you're talking to your client, be able to give them 2 or 3 different energy analysis reports that allows you to show how, if you do an overhang here and you change the design from one design option to another, how that's going to impact the energy use of the building, and to clearly show that with an energy analysis report. So let's talk a little bit about BIM and documentation. As I mentioned early on, ArchiCAD is defined as a BIM tool that allows us to link plans, elevations, sections, details, and schedules to this documentation model. So the BIM model is a central database, and the database allows us to extract the plans, the elevations, the sections, details, and schedules. As you change any one of those, it's going to go back and update that central database. Dimensions are automatic and associative, as I'll talk about in a second. Intelligent objects are scale sensitive. Of course, detailing is faster because the intelligent objects enhance drafting features, and the layouts reduce errors and redlining. We'll talk about all that as we go through this in more detail in a second. So here's how it works. So in ArchiCAD, we create a model, and then we open up our section tool to find the section name, select a section marker, draw the section onto our floor plan, decide which way we want to view with it, select the marker, and open the section. This is how a building information modeling tool is meant to work. The model is a holistic model. It's a 3D model from which we're extracting our drawings, be that sections or elevations or details, from which we can begin to add and to embellish further the documentation for our project. One of the things that we often tell our clients is that the drawings that come out of your BIM model may or may not be the final drawings, but they're going to be pretty close. So even if they get you 90% of the way there, you only have to do 10% more of work. That's 90% of savings and time that you saved by not having to construct that drawing from scratch. Also, as changes occur in the model, those drawings are updated. So we can always draw on top of these drawings. We can add more embellishment. We can add more detail. But the majority of the information is coming from the model. It's allowing us to save ourselves a lot of time in constructing this information. Most importantly, as I mentioned, is as information changes, it's updated throughout the model. So if we have a door in our elevation, when we move it, it moves within the plan. If we change the door size, obviously it's going to change within the plan. If we delete the door, it's going to delete on the plan and heal the wall. This is all the very basics of what I'm talking about when I say that it's an integrated 3D database of which, as you draw within the model and update and change the model, it's updating and changing throughout our building program. And as I mentioned, dimensions are automatic and associative. When you put a dimension down, it's associated with an element. As you change the element's size, that dimension automatically changes. As you move it, it changes. If you delete the dimension, it will update and change. As you delete the element, it will update and change the dimension strings associated with it. This is a very important distinction between a BIM tool and a drafting tool. In a drafting tool, you dimension to lines and to circles and to edges of 2D elements. In a BIM tool, you dimension directly to and connect it to the element. So when the element changes and moves, those dimensions are associated with that element, which makes it a lot more dynamic. And if you can think about it, for instance, if you go to an elevation and you move a window, change the size, and if it has dimensions associated with it, well, those dimensions are automatically being updated on the plan as you're doing that. And this is how the interaction within the model is extremely important from an integrated 3D database, and why it's so much different and more efficient than something like SketchUp or something like FormZ, which are great programs, but when you get further into the documentation process, those programs are not built for doing the real detail work that these are. So speaking of details, one of the benefits of a BIM program is the ability to extract details from the model. So how does that work? Well, the first thing we do is we go to the detail tool. In the detail tool, we enter in a name for a detail, and then we describe where we want that detail to be pulled from. Once we describe around the area that we want to pull the detail, place a detail stamp, open that detail drawing. That detail is extracted from the model. At this point, we can begin to edit the detail, add line work, change any information that was pulled out. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I always tell clients to think about this as a starting point. It's not going to be 100%, maybe 90%, might be 100, might be 95%. But at this point, you're going to start adding information to it and starting to embellish it to create that detail that ultimately needs to be created. Another area that we see a lot of our clients starting to really use the BIM program for is 3D details. Now, in the past, with both, with both 2D applications like AutoCAD, we could create 3D details by simply constructing them point by point, but that was really inefficient. Here, we can actually extract those 3D details from the model. Let me show you how that works. The first thing you do is you define the view. So you use the marquee. You marquee around an area of the project that you want to extract the detail. You right-click. You say, Show Selection Marquee in 3D. And then it extracts that particular view, that detail, that component into the 3D window. At this point, I could use this extracted view for a presentation. I could also use it for a detail. Because one of the things that you can do is within our 3D document settings, I can actually create a 3D document, and that 3D document can be set to be black and white or color. If it's black and white, I can then use it as part of my documentation. And because it's a document, I can add dimensions, I can add notes, I can begin to use this 3D view as an actual drawing. And more importantly, this drawing is directly connected to my model. So while it looks like it's a 3D cutaway, well, it is a 3D cutaway, but while it looks like it's disconnected from the model now, it's actually still connected. If I were to select one of the sunshades, they would actually select as an element, and if I move them, I would actually be editing the model, even though this is a cutaway. So this is a live auto rebuild view derived from the model. Another area that ArchiCAD has a real real power in its program is something called virtual trace. Virtual trace, if you're familiar with AutoCAD and the X-referencing of AutoCAD, virtual trace is similar to that. It allows us to visually compare overlays with other drawings. So one of the things in ArchiCAD that you can do is you can take something, say, as a reflective ceiling plan, structural plan, or other types of drawings, and you can view those within the current drawing you're in. So you'll see this kind of purple background here. That is the ceiling plan that when you right-click any view within ArchiCAD, you can show as a trace reference. This is extremely powerful for being able to view views you're working on, drawings you're working on, within other views. You can also use what's called a splitter. It's kind of like being on a light table, having drawings on top of each other, pulling them back for the old guys who remember light tables. It's like pulling back the drawing on top of another drawing as you're looking at it on a light table. In this case, we're using a splitter bar. We're simply pulling the drawing on top, which is our active view, to see the reference view behind it. One of the most important features, I think, in ArchiCAD that a lot of our clients say is one of their highest productive features is this button right here. This button allows you to reverse the active view with a reference view. So let's say, for example, if I click this button, what would happen is that all of a sudden my active view, the plan on top, would become my reference, and the reference would become my active. Why is that important? Well, let's say, for example, that you were working on the floor plan, and you discovered as you're working on it, and you see the reference to the ceiling plan, but below it, that a light needs to move on the ceiling plan in relationship to what you're working on the floor plan. So rather than having to close a drawing, go to another drawing to open it and then to make that change, you simply click this one button, and it now allows your floor plan to become the reference. It allows your ceiling plan to become the active, and now you can move that light, make whatever changes are necessary, and then simply flip it right back. It's a very, very efficient process and a hugely popular feature. But we are not just limited to floor plans within views. We can also view any drawing within a view. I can view an elevation, I can view a section, I can view details, I can essentially view any view within any view. So as this example shows, I could open up my south elevation, and I could turn on my floor plan as a reference. So I can see that in relationship. Or I could be in my floor plan view, and I could turn on my ceiling plan, my elevation view, and see that as a reference. And again, the same thing holds true. I simply right-click that elevation, say Show as Trace Reference, and that will automatically show on this view. Here's an example. We draw a detail, we select that detail, and we open it up. And so now we've got an enlarged plan view, a detailed plan view of a part of the project. At this point, because it's a detailed drawing, we can begin to edit this. We can add line work. We can begin to add notes, information, obviously begin to embellish this detailed view based upon whatever needs to happen to develop the view, or develop the drawing. But what's important here is that at any point in time, we can turn on the reference behind it using our trace and reference view. So as you can see here, we can see the actual drawing from which this detail was derived. And we can see if there has been any changes, updates, and we can use that as a reference if we need to snap to any element within that reference view. So again, this is an extremely important feature within ArchiCAD as you work and dimension and develop and model your projects. Of course, another very important part is the building database that I talked about at the beginning of this presentation. The building intelligent database not only links the drawing so when you change one drawing it updates another view, but also links information. So for example, layouts and drawing tags. In ArchiCAD we have what's called intelligent auto text. By putting auto text onto our title blocks, such as a subset name, layout number, it allows this information to automatically update and automatically populate when we place it into a folder that we create within our drawing set. Also, as we put drawings onto sheets, they will go back and automatically update our section and detail symbols, because those are also automatically tagged with auto text embedded into the program as part of the process. So let's see how it works. So on the left here, you'll see is a section symbol where we have a DRG ID. This is a database tag for a drawing ID. And on the bottom is a database tag for a layout ID. It has not yet been inputted because we have not yet placed that drawing onto a sheet. On the right, you can see is a drawing that already exists on a sheet. It exists on sheet A10, and it's in the order number 1. So here's how it works. First, we go to our layout book. We double-click the drawing sheet that we want to place the drawing onto. We go to our drawing tool. We click on the sheet, and we locate our drawing that we want to place onto that sheet. In this case, we want to place the section. We select that, go place, and it places on a sheet A09. Go back to our view, update it, and we can now see that that is now on sheet on sheet A09, and it's drawing 1 on that sheet. That's all there is to it. This is the automation that happens behind ArchiCAD as part of a holistic part of the program for updating drawings and layouts, as well as updating the model and the drawings. The layout numbers are also automatically updated whenever you move a layout within a layout set. So for example, if we zoom into this title sheet, we change that drawing to a different subset, it's now in the AE section. And if we take that and change its order within that section, we will see that it automatically updates that sheet number. This is incredibly efficient. If you can imagine, for those of you who have done many red lines in the past, redlining when drawings move and you mistakenly didn't pick up a certain detail symbol at some part of the drawing, this really takes care of a lot of those problems. A lot of the red lines that I know I have, and I know many of you have had to deal with in the end or in the past, kind of go away. You also have project information you can input automatically that will automatically update your file with your client name, client number, project name, etc. So you don't have to keep updating that continuously as you change information on your project. Another very important aspect to this process are automated window and door schedules. These are linked to the model. As I mentioned earlier with the schedule for area calculations, is that they're bidirectional. So when you reach into the schedule and you select one of the schedule items, you can actually open that item, change the material in this example. You could change the width, the height of this window, its ID. It would automatically update the model, and vice versa. If I was in the model changing that window, it would automatically update the schedule. Additionally, we have something in ArchiCAD called model referencing. This allows us to reference unit modules or project models. For example, if you've got a project that's a multifamily project, you've got unit A that's repeated 20 times in the project, you could develop that as a single story reference and reference that through the project. You could also develop as a multi-story reference and reference it through the project. Any change I make to either one of these is going to update all the linked references. So only update it once, and it updates throughout the model. I could also do it if I had a site, for example, that had several buildings on it. I could develop each building as an individual ArchiCAD file, and then I could link those individual buildings to the site model. Another very important feature in ArchiCAD is our renovation feature. This was introduced in ArchiCAD 2 versions ago, and I would have to say is one of the most popular new features in ArchiCAD that has come out recently. What this allows us to do is to manage a renovation project in a much more holistic way, and just in a way that reduces the amount of layers that we have to use, and also allows information to have intelligence to it. I'll talk about that in a second. So for example, our existing plan might look like this. Our demolition plan changes maybe some colors. After demolition, some information goes away. New construction shows you with different colors, perhaps different line types. And then the plan status changes to what that would show in the end. It allows us to really change the way that the information looks based not upon layers, but based upon model view information. So here's how it works. We have a renovation filter. This renovation filter, as I just showed you, has 5 different parts: existing, demolition, after demolition, new construction, and plan status. Each of these has a specific filter that is defined with it, so it shows the information based upon the way you want it to show. So for example, if we select demolition and we start to draw or select a wall and then hit the demolition button, it will change that information to being dashed in red. We didn't change it to a different layer. We simply clicked the demolition button. Now, if we change this to new construction, we can hit the new construction button, begin to draw a wall, define the wall, define its height, information about it. And then as we draw the wall, it also will look slightly different than the existing walls because, of course, this is a new wall. We want the new wall to have a certain hatch pattern within it. Perhaps you want it to have a different color. But you begin to define the new construction with a different graphic look and feel. And again, this is not using layers. All this information is on the same layer. What we do is when we save a view, those views now can be saved so that they instill within the view the information about whether it's a demo view, an existing view in this case, or a new view. So each of these views will be used to define the final drawings. So in the end, we will take these views, place them onto a layout, and within the layout, they will contain the information for how we want the information to be displayed. So once this is done, you'll see that we can actually double click on each of these views, and they will automatically change the nature of how the information looks and how it's going to be defined when it gets placed onto the layout and ultimately for the final drawings. So let's talk a little bit about BIM and collaboration. For those of you who are in small firms but still work with more than just yourself, we do need to work with others, whether that's consultants, whether that's people within our office, or a variety of different types of clients, etc. First, let's talk about teamwork within the BIM model. ArchiCAD has built into it something called a BIM model server. This is part of ArchiCAD's standard work set, and allows us to actually share the model through a BIM model server, so that when we have a remote PC, let's say we have a laptop out on the site or at a client's office or perhaps on a plane someplace, we can actually access the model through the model server, and we can actually be collaborating with people anywhere in the world. One of the good examples of this is we have a structural engineer based out of Idaho who's been working with a lot of California clients, ArchiCAD clients. They share the BIM model dynamically, and they can see what the architects are doing, and the structural engineer and the architects can see what the structural engineer is doing. And I'll show you exactly how that works in a second. First off, and the way that the teamwork reservation system works is that once you've shared a project, you are now a team member within the project. So in this case, Chris Goring is one of the team members. He can send and receive information. He can reserve information, and of course, release information. And if you right-click on any element within ArchiCAD, you have the ability to reserve that element as well as release it. So in ArchiCAD, we have the ability to go to teamwork. And once it's a project's been shared, we can open up the teamwork palette. It now becomes active. And we will see the members on the team. Again, you do not have to have a huge team in order to use teamwork. I actually know single practitioners who use teamwork because they have their model at their office and their BIM server at their office, but when they're away, they can access that model from anywhere. So it will, even though they are an individual, they want to be able to access that in a mobile way through their BIM server. We also have a lot of small firms, 2, 3, 4 people. They're simply using this within their office to share projects. So again, once you have your project shared, you then can log people on. And the way that you reserve information is very simple. You select the elements in the project, you right-click on those elements or click the reserve button to reserve selected elements. And that's all there is to it. It's a very simple process, and I'll walk you through it in a little bit more detail in a second. One thing you might also want to know is that you can see what people are working on. There's a variety of ways that we can view this in terms of visual feedback that helps you identify what each other has, what you've signed into within the project, and the projects that you're and the information that you're working on. So this particular screen you'll see is kind of like a screen within a screen. In the upper left-hand corner, we have Bill Smith's workstation, and on the majority of the screen, we have my workstation. When someone goes to reserve a space, as I mentioned before, well, first, before I do that, you can gray out your colored workspaces. You can highlight your reservations. You can also show reservations by users. If no one signed in any information yet, it's all blue. To sign in information, you can right-click on information, or you can do a crossing with a marquee, hit the reserve button, and that is now your space, your working environment. And you'll see that on Bill Smith's machine, he automatically sees almost in real time that you have now signed into that part of the project, because if he has this view to show it as reservation by users, he will see that you just signed into that part of the project as read on his screen. This also provides instant team communications. It's an extremely valuable tool. It allows you to send instant messages through ArchiCAD that are element-based. So why is that important? Because element-based means that I can send an instant message across to everybody to load libraries. I could assign selected elements to someone on the project and give them a specific assignment to do with those elements. I could ask someone to review elements on the project. So there's a variety of reasons and ways that we use this instant messaging. The most common is for when you need to access information that someone already has signed out. So I'm going to send a request to someone who has this information currently signed out. On their machine, while they're working, they're going to get an ownership request dialog. When they click the show button, it'll immediately pan over to where on the project someone is asked to work on this information. You're going to say, okay, no problem. You can have this information. I'm not using these right now, and hit the grant button. This is an element-based instant messaging system. It allows you, again, to attach information for a variety of purposes, send instant messages assigned to that, and track whether or not information has been done, what's still in the queue, because you have an entire message system over here that's being tracked as part of that project. We also have BIM model coordination. What does that mean, BIM model coordination? BIM model coordination would be coordination with other programs that require 3D information. That could be for energy analysis, such as Green Building Studio, Energy Plus, Ecotech, IES. It could be working with something like Google SketchUp on a model level, or Technical Structures for structural, or Skia Engineer, or Autodesk Revit. SAP 2000, these are all different engineering programs. It could be working with MEP programs such as Graphisoft MEP Modeler, AutoCAD MEP 2009, or Revit, Autodesk Revit MEP. ArchiCAD allows us to actually take the information out to a variety of different sources through various connections that it has from the program. One of the most popular is the Revit API add-on to ArchiCAD that allows us to share the information through what's called an IFC exchange. It's an exchange that's been developed by a number of entities within international, what's called IAI, International Association Alliance, I think it is, Alliance Association. Anyway, it's a association that develops this universal format and has now been adopted broadly throughout the world and the US, including Autodesk and Graphisoft, as the means to use to move information from one BIM program to another. And so if you are using ArchiCAD, you can actually send your engineer this add-in, and then they can simply export this directly from Revit to use in ArchiCAD. Document coordination would actually relate to your 2D BIM files. So 2D DWG files. So when you're working with AutoCAD, for example, you want to be able to share this information as DWG and X reference information. So let's say, for example, you get a DWG file from your consultant. You want to import that in as a DWG file into ArchiCAD. So what you would do is then to simply open that, select DWG, and open it up. Or you could export it to your consultant as well. We support complete collaboration with consultants for DWG formats, including X referencing, paper space, and model space support. And finally is mobile document sharing with Hyperlink BIM model. This is new to ArchiCAD 17, was recently introduced about 2 months ago. And this is BIMX docs with what they call hypermodel capability. This allows you on a dynamic touchscreen environment to connect your 3D model with your 2D documentation. This is an extremely powerful new system that has won several awards and also recently is now being seen as an opportunity to be used in the field for construction as well as for presentations. As I mentioned, it was just recently ranked number 3 in the top 10 apps for architects by Arch Daily. It's an extremely powerful system to navigate 3D models. If you click on any blue dot, that blue dot will automatically take you to a link for a section, or an elevation, or a 3D view. And so these drawings are linked much like your model is within ArchiCAD, but this is within your iPad or mobile environment. The drawings are also model context sensitive. So you can see that you can actually select a drawing and it actually is connected to the model. So as you move that drawing in or out, it will actually automatically be cutting the building, which gives you a really wonderful interactive way of taking a look at the building in relationship to the drawing that you've never been able to see before, because this interactive slider provides a really powerful coordination tool on top of this mobile device. And most important is that it's connected to the cloud. So whether you use Graphisoft's cloud-based BIMX transfer service or something like Dropbox, it will automatically recognize any changes that are done to the file and update those changes to the cloud very quickly and very efficiently, because it's just bringing the changes across, not the entire model. And it will then update that automatically. And finally, it's really fast. Compared to PDFs, it is lightning fast. If you ever use PDFs within a model and across large layout books, it can sometimes be a little bit struggle. This is amazingly fast on the mobile devices. It uses something called a map app technology, and it is just wonderful to use. So I would highly recommend going to the App Store, downloading it, and taking a look at it. Certainly something that's useful for both 3D navigation, 3D presentations, as well as for the connection to your 2D documents.